Chihiro was a funny-looking creep who had no interest in girls because he was obsessed with zombies. However, everything changes when he accidentally turns the popular girl in school into a zombie. Now he has to date her to crack zombie cheeks. During his early years, Chihiro lost his mother, and this tragic loss left him depressed until he found comfort in zombie movies and video games. Several years later, Chihiro is still obsessed with zombies, and he's become so down bad that he dreams of having one as a girlfriend. One evening, Chihiro meets up with his family members at the historic temple where they live, and even though his mom isn't around anymore, he's happy that he has a loving family and even owns a pet cat called Babu, whom he adores. However, this comfort is soon shattered when Truck-kun sends his pet cat, Babu, on a one-way trip to the afterlife, leaving Chihiro completely devastated. The next morning, Chihiro is bamboozled because he never thought losing someone would hurt that much, and he decides to do something about it because he believes that no one deserves to die. He immediately gets to work by digging out an old manuscript he found in a sacred temple, which covers the topic of resurrection, and after studying it, he takes Babu's corpse to an abandoned building to practice it. Since he's the only degenerate on Earth that goons to zombies, he's certain that he'll love his cat, even if he turns into one, so he starts setting up everything for the ritual. Suddenly, he hears a voice shouting from the outside, and he sees a baddie named Raya, loudly ranting about how her father stops her from living freely, so he pops open a can of Coke to enjoy this drama since he can't afford Netflix at home. Turns out, Raya's dad was a degenerate who took OnlyFans pictures of her with no plot covers on. But she eventually grew older and realized it was weird, so she confronted him about it. However, her father started targeting people that befriended her, and she realized that she was completely powerless against him. So she accepted her fate and continued posing for him to prevent more people from getting off-screened. This traumatic story shocks Chihiro so much that he drops his drink, allowing her to spot him. Shortly after, Raya joins him inside, and after hours of awkward silence, she begs him not to tell anyone about what he saw, but he tells her that he heard her full backstory, which makes her so embarrassed that she wishes she could die. However, Chihiro says her behavior is understandable given her background, and this makes her finally calm down, so he tells her about his plan to bring Babu back from the dead. Chihiro feels that he's only bothering Babu with his selfishness, but Raya says he's wrong because she's sure Babu wants to see him again. She then offers to help Chihiro out with his experiment, but Chihiro flips the script by asking her to become a zombie since she already hates her life. Raya starts freaking out, so he says he's only teasing her because of her lack of experience with boys. When she asks if he has a girlfriend, Chihiro admits that he doesn't and explains that he only ever wants to date a zombie girl since he isn't attracted to human girls. She then teases him by asking him to take responsibility for her when she turns into a zombie, and this leaves him speechless. So she laughs at him and asks him to consider it, making him feel salty about losing their tease battle. The next evening, Raya is back at the abandoned building helping Chihiro, and she wonders why he isn't done with the potion. So he explains that they don't have the full formula because part of the manuscript is damaged, which is why they're trying out random venomous plants. As Chihiro rattles his miniature brain to figure out which herb he hasn't tried, Raya suddenly runs away to fetch what she believes to be the answer. Later that day, Chihiro is worried because Raya still hasn't come back, so he goes out to search for her. However, he sees that she's on the verge of falling from a slope, so he runs over and saves her just in time. When they enter the building, Chihiro asks what she was doing on the cliff. So Raya explains that flowers growing around there are extremely poisonous, and she thought it would be much faster to climb the slope to pick it. Chihiro calls her reckless, but she argues that it's fine because she's sure he'll bring her back to life if she dies. So he reminds her that it's impossible since he still hasn't cracked the puzzle on how to revive Babu. However, Chihiro doubts that the hortensia flowers are poisonous since he can find it everywhere, but Raya explains that a lot of them are planted in her garden, and her father had once warned her to never put any in her mouth because they're deadlier than cyanide. After Chihiro makes the herbal mix, he pours it into Babu's mouth, and Raya prays desperately for the cat to respawn, but it remains dead. As they leave the building, Raya suggests trying with another herb the next day, but Chihiro says it's time they stop because he feels that he's being selfish to Babu, and then asks her to join him in burying him the next day. Shortly after, Chihiro drops her off at a spot close to her house and reminds her to show up for Babu's funeral before leaving. However, Denichiru sees Chihiro leaving through his security cameras, so once Raya enters the house, he smacks her in the face as punishment, and tells her she's grounded for the rest of her life. Soon after, Raya is in her room, drowning in misery, and she decides to end it all by taking the poisonous Hortensia serum. Meanwhile, Chihiro returns home, but his cousin, Ranko, pesters him with questions about where he's been and forcefully opens the box carrying Babu. Suddenly, Babu jumps out of the box as a rabid beast, and Chihiro is shocked that his resurrection experiment actually worked. The next morning, Raya wakes up in her room, and she's disappointed by the fact that she didn't die, but also confused as to how the poison didn't unalive her. After putting on her uniform, she heads downstairs and pulls a Scarlett Johansson-level acting performance while cheerfully greeting her parents. Denichiru then apologizes to Raya for smacking her the previous day, but she claims that she deserves it because she did something she shouldn't have, and thanks him for punishing her. This makes him happy, so he pets her face while telling her that he's the only one who can protect her, and she coldly agrees with him. He then informs her that wearing a uniform is pointless, because he's already made plans to have her homeschooled from that day forward, and orders her to go get changed. When she returns to her bedroom, she listens through the door and hears the butler giving Denichiru all the information about Chihiro, and Denichiru decides to cut off his danglers so that he'll never come close to his daughter again, causing Raya to panic. Meanwhile, at Chihiro's home, Ranko yells at Chihiro for doing experiments to bring Babu back to life, and his sister, Mero, says that she never thought her brother's obsession with zombies would make him act like a discount Jinwoo. However, the idiot defends his actions by pointing out that Babu truly came back to life, and even though Ranko is caught by his riz, she feels that there's something strange about the cat because it has Undertaker eyes and doesn't show emotions anymore. Chihiro tries to argue, and she whispers to him that Babu could start biting people and turning them to zombies, but he dismisses it as something that could only happen in manga. Suddenly, Babu dashes away, and Chihiro runs after her, so Ranko chases both of them. All the noise attracts their grandfather, Jogo, so Mero explains to him that Chihiro brought Babu to life, and the old fart is so impressed that he laughs like a cartoon villain. Meanwhile, Chihiro and Ranko follow Babu through a fence, and Chihiro reminds Ranko that she has training that morning, but she insists on tagging along to watch over him. Suddenly, the cat jumps into a hole, and without hesitation, Chihiro jumps in right after it. Meanwhile, Arya sees Raya sneaking out of their house, so she smiles and goes to invite Denichiru for 5 rounds of Netflix and chill, but he ignores her and moves forward.
You are gay.
So she crashes out at the abusive scumbag. At the same time, Chihiro and Ranko are crawling through the hole to find Babu, but Ranko's thick plots get stuck, so she asks Chihiro to wait for her. However, Chihiro leaves her behind and continues moving ahead until he finally escapes the hole. He notices that Babu led him to a spot that's directly under the building where he performed the experiments. At school, Chihiro's besties, Yasuda and Mogi, are toying around with each other, but Raya suddenly arrives and tells them that she's looking for Chihiro. Since they don't know where he is, Raya leaves to continue her search in the street nearby. However, the butler arrives and informs Denichiru that Raya has flown the coop, but Denichiru says it's fine and asks him to keep following her. After ending the call, Denichiru starts crashing out as he wonders why Raya refuses to listen to him. Meanwhile, Chihiro is searching desperately for Babu through a graveyard, but he starts to hear rumblings from the crowd that make him worry that it's about to rain. While exploring the nearby garden, he finds Babu eating hortensia flowers, and when he sees that there are a bunch of them around, he realizes that it's the same cliff that Raya climbed the other day. Just then, Raya shows up, walking through the cliff while thinking about how she wants to find Chihiro so that he wouldn't get into trouble because of her. However, Denichiru finds her and promises to forgive her if she comes home with him. While approaching her, he stretches his hand to touch her, but she slaps away his hand and tells him that her heart and body don't belong to him before asking him to give her some freedom. Hearing this, Denichiru goes into full gaslighting mode, asking her if she wants freedom to love and go outside, but this makes her panic, so he grabs her. As he walks away with her, Raya begs him to release her for that day, but he refuses because he doesn't want her V card to be stolen by Chihiro. Suddenly, Babu jumps on the cliff, and Denichiru starts shivering in fear, but Raya is excited to see him alive, so she rushes to pet him. Denichiru tells her to move away from him, but Raya's mind is focused on the fact that the Hortensia serum worked, so Denichiru moves in to hit Babu. However, Raya jumps in to shield Babu, only to end up getting hit instead, and she falls off the cliff, landing headfirst on a rock, causing a fatal injury. Denichiru breaks down, and as the rain begins to pour, Chihiro begs her to get back up, but eventually realizes that she's already dead. As Babu licks her wounds, Chihiro remembers her telling him to revive her if she dies, but he realizes that he can't do it. Suddenly, Rei gets back up with her guts spilling out like she just fought conquest, and walks towards Chihiro. Seeing this, the butler concludes that God has resurrected Rei, and he tries to tell Danichiro, but the old fool is too heartbroken to hear a word he says. She then grabs him and smiles while reminding him of his promise to take responsibility for her when she becomes a zombie, and he agrees to fulfill his promise. In the dream world, Danichiro calls out desperately to Rei as she walks by, but she ignores him as she moves along. She eventually stops in a flower field, and he notices that she's all bloody, but he still grabs her hand to bring her home. However, he freaks out when he notices that she doesn't have a pulse, and she makes matters worse by turning to show her battered body while telling him that she died and was reborn. Even though Danichiro doesn't understand what she means, he still calls out to her, but she moves ahead while telling him that she's no longer his daughter because she's no longer human. Danichiro wakes up from this nightmare in the tub where all her pictures are scattered around him, and he wonders why everything turned out like that. A while later, the maids are in the hallway, gossiping about how Rei has been sneaking out at night to see a boy, and a four-eyed maid informs the others that she's run away. Just then, Arya arrives and asks them what they mean, so they explain to her that Danichiro told them that Rei ran away when he returned, and he's been in the bath ever since. Hearing this, Arya sends them to go tend the garden while charging ahead to meet her husband, but they gossip about how she's been going to pleasure houses since her husband isn't letting her taste his popsicle anymore. As Danichiro rests in the tub, Arya suddenly storms in, asking what he means by Rei running away, so he explains that she got up after dying and left him. However, Arya thinks he's delusional after gooning 50 times in a row, so she reminds him that Rei running away will ruin her reputation as head of the school board and asks him where Rei could be. The butler informs her that Rei is at Shiyu school with Chihiro, but once Danichiro hears Chihiro's name, he sees a vision where Chihiro and Rei are holding each other and concludes that he's the one who caused everything by deceiving Rei. He passionately jumps out of the pool and declares that he'll free Rei from Chihiro and purify her with his love once again. Meanwhile, Rei is sewing herself up using a technique called Mishin, and she explains to Chihiro that it's become a habit of hers to practice Mishin every morning, but he gets creeped out by the grotesque sight in front of him. After patching herself up, she covers the stitches with bandages and says she's happy and doesn't feel any pain anymore. But Chihiro grabs her arm while asking her how she can laugh when she knows she's dead. With her face glowing red like a stop sign, she explains that she's happy because it's the first time she's ever been in a boy's room, but this only confuses him even more. Meanwhile, Renko is taking off her sports gear after practice when her friend arrives and asks her to join her for some sweets after school, but Renko declines because she plans on going straight home that day. However, she's actually ticked off that her dumb cousin ditched her in a hole to chase a cat, and she plans to strangle him. Back at Chihiro's house, Rei is enjoying the view from the window, but Chihiro is worried that she might start freeloading in his room. He keeps staring at her exposed cakes until she calls his attention to show him that Babu is in a nearby tree, and he feels relieved that the cat is okay after making him worry. When he calls out to Babu, the kitty gives him a bombastic side eye, but he's surprised that Babu's irises have returned to normal. Rei asks if Babu is okay since he has a stuffy nose, so Chihiro explains that Babu has been that way ever since the day he found him, and even the vet couldn't cure him. As Babu meows loudly, Rei informs Chihiro that he thinks the tree is most comfortable for him, and Chihiro is shocked that she can understand what he's saying. He realizes that zombies can communicate with each other, but he also notices that her personality has changed ever since she became a zombie. When she notices that he's feeling anxious about her, she starts teasing him by acting like a zombie, and he blushes while telling her that she's already cute enough. He then asks her if she's bothered by the fact that she's a zombie, but she says she isn't because he's already promised to take responsibility for her. When Chihiro asks what she means by taking responsibility, she mentions all the different places they could visit together and asks him to let her experience everything that normal girls do. But this confuses him even more. Suddenly, Rei grabs him and moves in to smooch him, but Renko ruins the moment by calling Chihiro to come out. When he meets her by the window, she scolds him for abandoning her and asks to meet him in his room, but he suggests meeting her outside instead because he doesn't want her to find out about Rei. After he leaves, Rei has a full meltdown as she realizes what she was just about to do with Chihiro, and she realizes that she's now attracted to him. Meanwhile, Chihiro apologizes to Renko for leaving her, but she still strangles him while asking about Babu. He assures her that Babu is safe, so she dumps him on the grass and asks him if Babu is going to remain immortal. Suddenly, Yasuda arrives and starts begging Chihiro to introduce him to Reiya since he's a Riz god, but Renko is surprised that Chihiro even knows Reiya in the first place. Meanwhile, Reiya is waiting for her prince to return, and she starts to wonder who Renko is to him. She realizes that no one else is at home. She goes to the bathroom and has a shower, but she can't tell if the water is hot or cold due to her zombie skin. While exploring the bathroom, she finds a weird toy and starts playing with it, but Grandpa Jogo suddenly arrives and pounces on her, thinking she's the resurrection of a lady named Sada. She manages to toss him away and leave the bathroom, but he tries to pounce on Mero, who puts him down and reminds the old fool that his wife's name was Kyo and not Sada. In Chihiro's room, Reiya rests on the bed, feeling happy that she's finally become free, and she decides to spend the rest of her days living like that as she falls asleep. When Chihiro returns, he sees Reiya lying on the floor, so he starts flirting with her using pickup lines from his zombie movies, but she reveals that her body is stiffening up. After examining her, he tells her that it's just a natural phenomenon, but he realizes that her body will rot away if he abandons her, so he tucks her in bed and decides to protect her body. As she sleeps, Chihiro brainstorms about a way to fix her situation, and he eventually leaves the room while wishing her good night. He heads to another room and tries to sleep, but he sees visions of Reiya laughing happily, which makes him remember that her body would soon rot away due to a condition called rigor mortis. However, he decides to find a way to preserve her body before the rigor mortis can take full effect. The next morning, Chihiro asks Meiro for a book on how to preserve corpses, but she says she's lent the book to someone and asks why Chihiro wants the book. However, Chihiro lies that he doesn't need it anymore and leaves the room so she wouldn't be suspicious of him. He then draws up a warning sign on his door and heads inside his room, where he notices that Reiya looks like a normal person as she sleeps. Suddenly, his dad, Don, calls him and Meiro to come downstairs for breakfast, and this makes him realize that the bed isn't a safe enough hiding spot for his sleeping beauty, so he decides to stuff her in the closet instead. After clearing out the closet, Chihiro drags Reiya's unconscious body towards it, but trips on a wire and falls on the hard ground, only to see that Reiya is on top of him. When his dad calls for him again, he places Reiya in the closet and assures her unconscious body that the rigor mortis will wear off in the evening. However, when he tries to touch her hair, her stomach suddenly growls, so he promises to get her something to eat when she can move again before rushing downstairs to meet his family. At the table, Chihiro is disappointed that they're having the usual breakfast, but he eats it anyway and remembers Reiya telling him she wants to live a normal life. He asks Meiro for her idea of normal, but she asks why he's suddenly interested in her, so he takes back his question and continues eating. A while later, Renko is outside Reiya's home, thinking about what Reiya could be, and her friend, Heron, suddenly pops out of the bushes to ask what she's doing there. Renko says she's doing family business and directs the question back at her, so Heron explains that she came to see how things were going because Reiya has been absent from school for a few days. While walking away, Renko claims that Heron has a lot of free time, but Heron reminds her that Reiya is basically the idol of the school and calls her an idol as well while tagging along with her. As they walk ahead, Heron says she's worried because Heron has been acting differently lately, but when Renko sighs, she realizes that Renko and the upperclassmen don't care much for Reiya, unlike the first years that treat her like a goddess. Heron then shows her a picture of Reiya while glazing her and some other pictures which they took together before pointing out that the maids at her house have been unusually busy lately. She fears that something could have happened to Reiya, but Renko doesn't care, so she walks forward nonchalantly. Back at Chihiro's home, they decide to clean the temple together as a family since they're on a school holiday, but Chihiro complains that he doesn't have time for it. While mopping the floor, he runs into his father, who asks why he's trying to take care of another cat when Babu died the other day, so he informs him that Babu has been resurrected. Don doubts him, so Chihiro asks Jogo to back up his story, and Jogo confirms that he did see the reincarnated Babu, so they laugh together. However, the old moron starts bragging about a resurrection pill he made, and this shocks Chihiro, so he starts asking Jogo questions about it, but Jogo ends up forgetting what he said in the first place. As Jogo walks to the bath, Chihiro tries to go after him, but Don holds him back and scolds him for trying to avoid his cleanup duty. While cleaning the walls, Chihiro realizes that his granddad is capable of making a reincarnation drug, and this means that Jogo might know something about preserving the body. Suddenly, Meiro startles him by calling his name and informs him that she plans on cleaning his room next, because she's sure that it's just as messy as a JoJo fan's brain. Chihiro agrees, but as she walks away to do it, his brain suddenly starts working again, so he chases her down and lies that she doesn't have to clean it because he's cleaned it himself. Just then, Renko arrives, and Chihiro asks why she's always dropping by, so she explains that she has some free time on her hands since she's done with all the deliveries for the day. She then hands Mero some lunch, and Don thanks her for always looking out for them, unlike this loser's son, who only cares about himself. He says he wishes that Chihiro would find a wife like Renko, and this shocks him, so Renko starts teasing him by making jokes about the private yoga sessions they do together. Renko then mentions that Raya snuck out of her house the previous night, and Bro immediately loses his cool, but she continues her story by revealing that Raya's family is one of her frequent clients. But when she made the delivery, the house was in uproar. Chihiro acts like he doesn't know what's going on. So she starts yapping about how Raya may be trying to elope with her forbidden lover and cooks up an entire knockoff of the Titanic movie to fit her silly delusions. She then asks him about how close he is with Raya, but he lies that they only met once and talked about stuff before asking why she's pestering him with these questions. Renko explains that she feels it's important to know about her brother's relationships, but he says there's no need for her, so she heads back home, and Don tells Chihiro to clean the back of the house. However, Renko decides to head back and borrow another zombie movie, and when she enters his room, she realizes that it's freezing in there. While scanning through his inventory, she finds a strand of hair and instantly realizes that it doesn't belong to Chihiro. Suddenly, she notices the room where Chihiro hid Raya and goes in to check, but she sees that it's empty because Raya is hanging on the wall behind her like Spider-Woman. When she turns back, she sees Raya right in front of her, but Raya tackles her to the ground and starts toying with her milk factories. Suddenly, blood starts dripping from Raya's body, and Renko realizes that she's a zombie, but Raya suddenly rips off her outfit, causing her to scream. Hearing this, Chihiro rushes back to his room and sees Raya treating Renko's body like an ice cream bar, so he pulls her away. However, Raya suddenly starts smooching him, and he tries to escape, but she grips him tightly with her gorilla strength, which makes Renko freak out. The kiss straight up rewires Chihiro's brain into Delulu land, where he sees a strange lady he doesn't recognize, and the lady points to Raya before disappearing. When Raya gets close, she claims that they're in his Mo situation before feasting on his glizzy. In the normal world, Chihiro is still stuck in her romantic death grip, and he realizes that she really granted his wish, but he still struggles to escape so that he wouldn't die a semi-virgin. Outside the house, Don tells Mero about the scream he heard, and she confirms that it was Renko, but tells him it's no cause for concern since Chihiro has gone to check on her. However, what she doesn't know is that Bro is currently getting the life sucked out of him in his room, and when Raya finally lets go of him, Renko angrily asks Chihiro why the runaway princess is hiding in his room. As he struggles to think up a lie, she brings up the fact that Raya is also badly injured and scolds him for not taking her to the hospital, but she stops her rant when she sees the strange expression on Raya's face. After taking a close look at her, Renko asks Chihiro if she's a zombie, and he tries to explain himself, but she calls him a murderer while throwing his alarm clock in his face. She then proceeds to pummel him with dolls while calling him a discount Orochimaru for unaliving people to experiment on them, and he tries to explain, but she starts strangling him violently. However, they see Raya escaping through the window, and she crawls while following Babu ahead, so Chihiro asks Renko to go get Jogo out of the bath before jumping out the window to catch her. As Chihiro runs ahead, Don calls out to him, asking if he's okay with all the strange noises he's been hearing, but Chihiro lies that Renko was simply scared by the Walking Dead movies she was watching. However, Don accuses him of trying to skip cleaning duty, and he explains that he's searching for Babo, so Don tells him to find him quickly. After Don leaves, Chihiro notices that Babu and Raya are no longer in front of him, and when he looks down, he sees them eating some leaves called hydrangea, which shocks him. As Raya eats the leaf, Chihiro notices that her eyes are changing, and suddenly, she regains consciousness, which makes Chihiro feel relieved. Suddenly, her towel snaps open, revealing her ripe apples to him, and she screams out loud before asking why she's outside like that. Chihiro immediately tosses one of his shirts, and realizes that the hydrangea extends the effects of the resurrection drug when zombies eat it, because it was a key ingredient in making it in the first place. He explains to them that they're basically putting the toxin back in their body, but Renko suddenly arrives with Jogo, who says he's proud of Chihiro for figuring it out. He then does his best impression of the Jujutsu Kaisen narrator while explaining that the resurrection pill is incomplete because, after taking it in its current state, the zombies will eventually lose their rationality and ability to move, leaving them dead just like before. The old goofball then starts having a bit too much fun on Renko's back, and she tries to wave him off, but he hangs on while trying to riz her up, thinking she's one of the prehistoric baddies he cracked in the past. While toying with Chihiro, he explains to Chihiro that the 3 steps to taking care of the zombies are to have them exercise regularly, live in a cold environment, and frequently replenish the hydrangea toxin. Eventually, Renko smacks the degenerate imp to the ground, and Chihiro asks why he didn't just write the information in the book, so Jogo calls him an idiot while explaining that he wanted him to discover it with his own power. As Dawn and Meiro stare in confusion, Chihiro asks if the hydrangea will stop the zombies' bodies from rotting, but Jogo explains that they won't because the resurrection pill is incomplete, and this means that it can only slow the process of decay, not stop it. He tries to explain further, but Renko nails him in the head with a bucket, causing his brain to go back to its default, stupid mode, and Renko apologizes while explaining that she didn't mean to do it. After Meiro leaves with Gramps, Chihiro stares at Reiya and realizes that he has to find a way to perfect her body on his own, but Dawn suddenly asks him who she is. Chihiro stutters like a brain-dead monkey while trying to answer his question, but Reiya is worried that Chihiro's family found out about her because she feels that they'd chase her away. When Chihiro notices that she's concerned, he finally grows some marbles and boldly asks his dad to let Reiya stay at their place, claiming that she has nowhere to go and he needs to take responsibility for her. Hearing this, Dawn is surprised that Chihiro is serious about something other than zombies, but he decides to let her stay because their home, the Shiryu Temple, was originally used as a women's refuge. Chihiro is surprised that Dawn just gave him the assist of the century, and Dawn says he has no reason to turn her away, which makes him even happier, but Renko isn't pleased about this at all. Filled with excitement, Chihiro informs Reiya that his dad has permitted them to live together, but Renko suddenly shows up with a salty expression on her face, which makes even the zombie girl worried about her. Suddenly, she starts strangling Chihiro again while calling him a womanizer, and she borrows a shirt from him to cover up her torn apron before running off to work. That evening, Chihiro decides to keep a journal to record his daily observations of Reiya because his grandfather advised him to do so, and he feels that by writing down their daily activities together, he'd eventually find a clue on how to preserve Reiya's body. Suddenly, Reiya arrives and apologizes to him for all the trouble she's caused so far, but he says it's no problem because it's helped him learn more about zombie characteristics. She then asks if it's okay for her to use his room alone, and he says it's okay because they're family now, but she claims that she doesn't mind sharing a room with him. However, Chihiro says he doesn't want the kiss scenario to repeat itself, and this makes her freak out as she realizes that she turned into Mia Khalifa when she blacked out. As Reiya makes her bed, Chihiro videotapes her in an attempt to record any slight changes in her, and he seizes the opportunity to gawk at her plots, which creeps her out. Some hours later, Chihiro takes a walk with Reiya while recording her, but her father's butler spots them. When they arrive at a grass field, Reiya thanks Chihiro for making her free, and Chihiro promises to properly take responsibility for her. On their way back, a car tries to isekai Chihiro, and Reiya shoves him out of the way with her super strength, but he injures his arm, so she licks it to make him feel better. The next morning, Renko enters the kitchen of her family restaurant, and she scolds Chihiro for being terrible at using knives, but he yells at her right back for nearly making him cut off his gooning hand. He then asks why she's making him help out at her family's kitchen on a Sunday, but she cheerfully pats him on the back while reminding him that they're old friends. As they argue, Renko's mom arrives and teases them by claiming that they'd make a better couple than Naruto and Hinata, and she low-key gives Chihiro the green light to perform Johnny-Sin's techniques on her daughter. This annoys Renko, so she tries to walk away, but slips on some food pieces on the ground, and Chihiro catches her just in time. After dragging her back up, Chihiro asks her to be more careful, and Renko's mom leaves because her job as wingwoman is done. Renko then leaves the kitchen for a private room, where she remembers the day she met Chihiro during their early years. Back then, Chibi Renko ran into a graveyard and got so scared that she started crying, but the mini Giga Chad, Chihiro, found her and offered to escort her back home. As they walked together, Renko asked if Chihiro was scared, but he said he wasn't scared at all, and this made her smile as she realized that she'd found her own Prince Charming. The next day, Dawn introduced Renko to Chihiro as her younger cousin, and she immediately asked to play with him because she thought she'd get along with him easily. He then took her to his room and put on a zombie movie, which made her freak out and hide in the corner. After regaining composure, she asked him to come play with her outside, but he said it was boring compared to his zombie drama, so she turned off the television. As they walked through town together, Renko asked Chihiro about his interests, but he told her that all he does is play with his tiny lightsaber while watching zombie movies. They eventually arrived at a flower garden, and Renko suggested making a playhouse there, but when she turned, she saw Chihiro digging up the ground to find a zombie, which he believed was buried there. Suddenly, some other boys arrived and started mocking him for playing with a girl, and Renko tried to defend him, but he cried and ran away, making them troll him even more. Seeing this, Renko realized that her prince was actually a zombie-loving weirdo who couldn't get along with other people. And the reason he could stay in the graveyard is because of all the zombie movies he's seen and the fact that his parents are priests. Before she knew it, her romantic feelings for him had completely calmed down, so when her mom asked her to say goodbye to him when they were leaving, she said she didn't want to. Back in the present, Chihiro and Renko are walking by the street together, and he's whining about how he has to do delivery work for her family's restaurant, so she explains that he has to because he didn't help out much in the kitchen. When he asks why she's tagging along, she explains that he wouldn't be able to greet customers properly, which would affect her company's reputation, and they meet Don, who colds Chihiro for complaining instead of working harder. He then thanks Renko for the help and gives her permission to use Chihiro as she wants because she always helps him out. After delivering the food to him, they make their way to the second customer's house, and Chihiro explains to Renko that he's worried about Rei-ya because there's a lot he doesn't understand about her situation, but Renko simply makes fun of him. Suddenly, Yasuda arrives and accuses them of being lovers, and Chihiro immediately declines, causing an argument between him and Renko. As they bicker, Yasuda is even more convinced that they're secretly cracking, so he starts crashing out, asking God why he's single while Chihiro is bagging all the baddies in town. He then asks Renko why she likes the zombie-obsessed weirdo, but Chihiro claps back by calling him a worthless loser who goons to their class girls. As they argue, Renko smiles and remembers how she reunited with Chihiro 2 years after their first meeting. Soon after, her dad decided that they should move from Chiba to Shiyu City, where Chihiro lived, and her house was in the same neighborhood as Chihiro's, so her mom used to invite him over to play at their house. Even though her love for him had grown cold, she'd still try to play with him because they were cousins, but he was too focused on his zombie books to give her attention. However, her mom, Kaoru, was totally obsessed with Chihiro, and she'd often tell Renko to get along with him. One day, Kaoru asked her why she wasn't playing with Chihiro, and she explained that it was because she didn't want to play a game or go outside. Hearing this, Kaoru suggested renting out an anime for them to watch together at the store and motivated her to keep trying to play with him. However, when they arrived at the store, Chihiro ditched her and started searching through the store's inventory for zombie movies. She tried to remind him that they're there for anime, but suddenly, the clerk arrives in a creepy zombie mask, causing her to freak out. Chihiro talked to him like a regular dude and left to buy more horror movies, and the man told Renko that Chihiro was amazing since he could watch horror movies without subtitles at his young age. On the way back home, Chihiro assured her that the series he chose for them is an interesting one, but she complained that she doesn't like horror and brought up the fact that it's not in English, so he promised her that she'd enjoy it either way. However, she ran in front of him and yelled that she wanted to watch anime instead before running away with his horror film. Suddenly, she ran into a scary dog and started panicking on the ground, so Chihiro grabbed a metal pipe and used it to chase the dog away. This made Renko realize that Chihiro was more admirable than she thought, so she held his hand on the way home and thanked him for saving her. That day, she fell in love with Chihiro again, and as they watched the zombie movie together, she asked him how he wanted his first kiss to feel. Chihiro claimed that he wanted to kiss a zombie girl, but she told him to think about it more since first kisses are important. Back in the present, as Mogi drags Yasuda away, Renko holds Chihiro's hand, and they talk about the day they met. After completing all the deliveries for the day, Renko tells Chihiro that he can go back home, so he tries to wave her goodbye, but she suddenly tackles him to a walk and leans in for a kiss. Even though Chihiro is uncomfortable with this, he doesn't resist, but she stops herself and yells at him for not understanding how important kisses are before running away. She soon arrives at a cliff, where she yells out loud that she wouldn't lose her love rivalry with Rei-ya. Later that evening, the entire family sits for dinner, and Rei-ya joins them for the first time. As she eats her leaves, Chihiro starts recording her for his observation journal, and he feels that it's very crucial, so when she complains that it's not necessary to do it while she eats, He explains that he has to take note of her changes. He then advises her to eat as she normally would, but Don points out that he's the one who isn't eating and tells him to cut it, so he joins them at the table. Seeing that Rhea is eating just leaves, Don asks her if she's a vegetarian, and she claims that she is, but Jogo starts crashing out about snails in his miso soup, which Mero reveals to be clams. After dinner, Chihiro writes down the things he's observed after watching Rhea for days, and the first point is that it's fine for zombies not to sleep. However, he feels that it's worth taking time to do it because he has to sleep normally, and Rhea would get bored. He also noticed that she showers even though she doesn't swear, and she doesn't use the bathroom either. To maintain the effects of the drug, she eats the hydrangea leaf every few hours. Suddenly, Babu comes in front of Chihiro and regurgitates a ball of hydrangea leaves like a hairball, and he feels that Rhea would be able to do the same, so he picks up his camera to record the iconic moment. Even though Rhea is embarrassed, he keeps following her with the camera like paparazzi, asking if something is going to come out of her mouth, so she decides to let him record her on the condition that he joins her in doing something a normal girl would do. The next morning, they go to the mall, where Rhea shows Chihiro a flashy dress she likes, but he nonchalantly tells her it looks good, so she scolds him for not paying attention. He then asks why she's so indecisive about her clothes, so she explains that she's trying to choose something good because it's rare for him to buy her something, but he points out that they've been there for an hour. However, she picks a hat which she likes as well, and Chihiro lets her buy it even though he knows his account balance is getting butchered. While recording her, he realizes that going out in the middle of the day will increase the speed at which her body is damaged, and he wonders if she wanted to go shopping that badly. As she talks to the clerk, Chihiro notices how cheerful she is and realizes that she couldn't do something like that in the past. Meanwhile, Ranko heads to a bathhouse, where she lets her milk bags hang out while enjoying a hot bath, but she remembers Chihiro passionately declaring that he'll take responsibility for Rhea, which makes her feel bad. Afterwards, she stands on a weight scale, still bothered by that memory because she's never seen Chihiro that serious before, and she's annoyed that he started living with a zombie without telling her anything, so she starts crashing out. Suddenly, Mero walks into the room, so she acts normal while explaining that she was hanging out at that bathhouse because she was done with all her responsibilities for the day. As Mero's friends prepare for the bath, Ranko asks about Chihiro, so Mero informs her that Chihiro is buying Rhea some clothes at the shopping center, which makes her jealous. However, she shrugs it off and decides to join Mero and her friends in the bathhouse. Back at the mall, Rhea returns in a dazzling outfit that makes her look like Japanese Cinderella, and her beauty melts Chihiro's brain, so he looks away while trying to act nonchalant. As they walk along, Rhea notices that Chihiro is holding a bag, so she asks him what he bought, but he refuses to tell her. However, they have no idea that a spy is watching them, and the spy reports to Danny Cheru that Rhea and Chihiro are heading into a shopping center. When he asks if he should make a move, Danny Cheru tells him to keep observing them for the meantime and wait for the right moment when Rhea is by herself before carrying out the plan. Soon after, the lovebirds enter a haunted house, where a zombie tries to scare Rhea, but she starts analyzing its makeup and sees her man cowering in the corner. While seated at a table, she makes fun of him for being scared of zombies, so he explains that they're different from the ones in the movies he watches, and she thanks him for the experience so far, causing him to blush. He then hands her the gift hidden in the bag, which is a coat she can wear to prevent her body from rotting away, and explains that it would allow her to live like a normal girl. But she starts crying and thanks him for thinking about her. However, she reveals that it's the first time she's noticed that zombies can cry, and Chihiro says he's surprised as well, so she laughs while pointing out that there are things that even the zombie nerd doesn't know about zombies. When he admits that she's right, she promises to teach him everything about zombies. Meanwhile, Danny Cheru is at home, doing his best Zorro impression, while monologuing about how he plans to capture Rhea again and show her what real freedom looks like. Back at the mall, Rhea's stomach starts growling, so Chihiro leaves to get some snacks, not knowing that her dad's spies are all around. Rhea feels lonely since she wouldn't get to eat while Chihiro is around, but she accepts that it's her fate since she's a zombie with messed up guts. Suddenly, Yasuda arrives and starts geeking out like an idiot about the different Netflix and chill positions he'd like to try with her, but this ruins the plan of the spies, so they decide to keep watching for the time being. As he pesters her, the spies decide to keep watching them for a while longer, but Masuda suddenly grabs her and runs to another part of the mall that he wants them to explore together, so the spies chase them down. They soon arrive at the door, and Masuda suggests playing outside, but she stays inside while complaining that she doesn't like going outside, so he starts doing Fortnite dances to motivate her. Seeing this, the spies decide to make their move, and one of them gags her mouth while the other carries her by the leg, and the third spy knocks out Masuda. However, Rei-ya manages to knock out one of the spies, and Chihiro hears her scream from inside the mall, so he rushes in to check on her, only to see that she's bodied all 3 spies with a heavy bench. She then cuddles him while crying and telling him how they tried to kidnap her, but he finds it weird because she literally just one-tapped all 3 mercenaries. Chihiro asks one of the spies why he's targeting her, but the other 2 spies suddenly carry him away, and Rei-ya runs after the spies, but they drive away with Chihiro. In the car, the spies inform Denichiru that they kidnapped Chihiro because Rei-ya has suddenly become She-Hulk, so Denichiru decides to torture Chihiro when he gets there. Sometime earlier, Mero stepped out to clean the yard, and she saw Rei-ya staring at the clouds, but Chihiro told Rei-ya not to spend too much time outside because the weather was good that day. When Rei-ya noticed Mero around, she greeted her, but Mero didn't reply, which made her worried as she crawled back inside to meet her boy toy. Some minutes later, Don informs Mero that he's leaving for the day, and he'll be late since he's meeting 3 practitioners that evening, which means that she doesn't have to make dinner for him. He also mentions that Chihiro wouldn't need anything as well, since his zombie mammy is in bed with him, and admits that he's surprised that Chihiro is doing so well in his mission of babysitting a zombie. This confuses her, so he reminds her that Chihiro is usually lazy and always relied on her, but he's now become more reliable since he's always talking about protecting Rei-ya. As Mero sweeps the floor, Don tells her that it makes no sense to sweep the same spot repeatedly before leaving. Later that evening, Mero walks into the spare room and sees Chihiro in a tent, locked in while studying zombies, which makes her realize that Don was right about how much he'd grown. She's moved by the fact that he's working hard for someone else for the first time in his life, but she proceeds to do her own homework. The next day, Mero arrives at school, where her friend, Ichi, starts yapping about a magazine which says that more people see zombies every year than before, but her other friend, Miko, says it's cap because the news would have reported it if it were real. However, Ichi is so blinded by her delusions that she loudly declares that the government is censoring information, and Miko still doubts because she believes they'd have run into a zombie if they were real, but Ichi claims that a zombie is very close to her. Ichi then brings up how their fine arts teacher, Yama, could be a zombie, because some days earlier, she looked through the door of the fine arts room and saw her eating some bloody pieces of meat with glowing eyes. Hearing this, Mero also brings up how Yama was walking to school one day, and she noticed her carrying a living animal in her bag, and Ichi concludes that she's a zombie. Miko asks about the animal she was feeding, so the delusion queen, Ichi, claims that it's a zombie offspring and decides that they should find evidence that she's a zombie. She gives them the name Zombie Troop Hunters Times and decides that they'd uncover the zombie mysteries at their school, but Miko and Mero are confused. Later that evening, the Powerpuff Girls hide in the fine arts room and watch while Yama pets a creature in the bag she's carrying. As she opens the bag, Miko starts panicking, but Ichi is hyped because it could be their first time seeing a zombie. She then pulls out a piece of meat and hands it to her pet, but when it jumps out to eat it, the girls get startled, causing them to knock over an art piece in the room. Shortly afterwards, the girls are in the back seat of Yama's car, staring in shock at her crocodile pet, and when they ask why she brings a crocodile to their school, she explains that she doesn't want to be separated from him in a second, since feeding him is the most relaxing part of her day. Ichi then asks why she's been getting thinner recently, so she explains that while she was preparing her croc's meal, the pig liver looked appealing, so she thoughtlessly ate some with him, but it ended up damaging her stomach. The next day in school, Miko asks Ichi if there's any zombie information, but she apathetically says there isn't, so Miko decides to lighten the mood by telling them about something she discovered on her way home the other day. While walking through the street, she smelt something that seemed like a rotten corpse, so she followed the smell, and it led her to a certain house. Out of curiosity, she peeped through the fence and saw a bunch of bones in a pot. Hearing this, Ichi gets excited, and Mero asks her what happened next. Back then, she continued sticking her tiny nose where it didn't belong until the owner of the house caught her red-handed, making her beg the gods to come save her. However, the homeowners were actually chill, as they took her in and laughed while explaining that the bones she saw were a bunch of ingredients they threw in the trash while making ramen for their shop. They then handed her some ramen, and after she took a bite, her taste buds were transported to the heavens, so she ate the rest of the ramen at lightning speed and even licked the plate like a dog afterwards. Later, at the playground, Ichi is swinging around while declaring that she won't give up her search for zombies, and Meiro drops the bombshell that a zombie is staying at her house. So she jumps out of the swing and asks her for pictures. However, Meiro complains that it would be an invasion of privacy that would affect their temple's reputation and business, and explains to her that the zombie at her place eats hydrangea instead of human flesh while dreaming of being a normal girl. This makes Ichi doubt that it's a zombie, but Meiro says her brother is the one who told her, and this only makes Ichi hesitant to believe her since she knows Chihiro is a piece of scum who fantasizes about zombies. On their way home, Ichi tells Meiro that her parents should scold Chihiro so that he'd behave better, but Miko reminds her that her mom is dead, so she apologizes for the disrespect. However, Meiro says it's okay, and as she moves through the street, she remembers the last memory she has of her mother, where her mother checked on her while she was sick. After buying some items at the convenience store, Meiro returns home, where she sees that Chihiro has left some weird snacks at her mom's grave again. She drops some proper food and pays her respects, but Reiya suddenly arrives and tells her about how she worries that she's creating problems for people around her. When she asks Meiro what she's doing, Meiro reveals that she's paying respects to her mother's grave, and that's when Reiya's undead brain finally clocks that Chihiro lost his mom. While paying respects to her, Reiya explains that she respects Meiro for doing all the housework at home, since she was raised in an overprotective family, but Meiro says she only does it because the men in her family are useless. Hearing this, Reiya offers to help with the house chores from that point on, and her warm smile reminds Meiro of her mom, so she starts blushing. She suddenly calls Reiya mama, and this shocks Reiya, so she runs away, but ends up falling and spraining her knee, which Reiya helps her patch. The next day in school, Meiro shows her friends a picture of herself cooking with Reiya, and they're shocked that she's that pretty. But Meiro feels that she looks exactly like her late mother. Back in the present, a maid cheerfully welcomes Chihiro to the Sanka family home while offering him a drink, but he crashes out over the fact that he's literally wrapped up like a burrito in a chair. As the maid leaves, he tries to call out to her, but she doesn't respond, so he starts yelling random nonsense to get their attention until Arya arrives in her usual drunk mode, complaining about how she could hear his noise from the corridor. When he asks who she is, she walks over to him while introducing herself as Dainichiru's wife, and he realizes that she's Reiya's mom. She then asks him how far he's gone with Reiya, and she presumes that her daughter must have gone full Bonnie Blue on him, since she's been suppressing her desires for so long. Chihiro argues that there's no way she'd do such a thing, but Arya still proceeds to call Reiya a monster because she knows zombies will eventually get rotten and start smelling. As she laughs, Chihiro is surprised that she'd say something about her own daughter, but Arya reveals that they aren't related by blood because she's actually Dainichiru's second wife. Chihiro is even more shocked because Reiya hasn't told him this, so she explains that revealing that secret is the biggest taboo in the Sanka family, which is why only a few people know about it. She then drops another bombshell, revealing that she was originally a maid for the Sanka family, and explains that before Reiya's birth, all the maids working in their house were prospective wives of the Sanka family's successor. Apparently, only people qualified in the areas of family class, education levels, and personalities could work inside the house. When Dainichiru was young, many maids offered him their peaches on a silver platter because they wanted to become part of the Sanka family, but he showed no interest in them. By the time Arya came there as a maid, Dainichiru was already a student in college, and another maid told her that she stood no chance of achieving her dreams because Dainichiru didn't care about women. However, Arya pulled a nasty comeback by telling the arrogant wench that Dainichiru just didn't have any interest in them because they're as chopped as Shrek's donkey, and the maid tried to slap her, but she held her hand. Arya was confident that Dainichiru would fall for her since no man had ever resisted her hourglass body figure, and on the day she was picked to serve him, she walked into his room and gracefully served him coffee. Dainichiru asked how she knew he wanted coffee, so she explained that she figured it was time for his refill, and even offered him a lap blanket, which made him so interested in her that he asked for her name and WhatsApp number. Following this, Arya was called to Dainichiru's side regularly, and she wiped his face after his training sessions. One night, after his nighttime reading, she made a move on him, but Dainichiru showed no interest in her, so she slowly started to think that Dainichiru truly swung the other way. However, things changed drastically on a certain day, during a social welfare event, where the Sanka family invited people with disabilities and people from the neighborhood for a fencing tournament, which Dainichiru competed in. After defeating a random French dude, Dainichiru was declared the winner, but instead of shaking his hand, he grabbed his shirt while angrily accusing him of not fighting seriously. Apparently, the Sanka family are the biggest sponsor of the International Fencing Federation, so they decided that Dainichiro should win the tournament, but Dainichiro didn't like the fact that the game was set up. As everyone was leaving the tournament, a crippled girl suddenly approached Dainichiro to return the gloves he threw away in anger, and she gave him a pep talk, telling him that he shouldn't react that way, even though he didn't like the outcome of the tournament because his parents worked really hard. This moved him so much that a few days later, Bro put a ring on her finger, and all the maids were shocked that he ditched them for a frail girl in a wheelchair with unknown lineage. As expected, the marriage was disputed by all members of the Sanka family, but Dainichiro didn't listen to his family's wishes, and he was so intent on doing wheelchair push-ups in bed with her that he gave up his headship of the family. All the family heads called him mad for giving up his throne for a commoner girl, but he warns them not to badmouth the woman he intends to marry because he'd already thrown away the Sanka family name and married her despite their arguments. However, right after the woman gave birth to Reiya, she died, and this left Dainichiro in a state of depression to the point where Arya and the other maids feared that he'd die as well. Arya still did her best to support him until he stopped looking like Vecna and became normal again. Even then, she helped him with all his needs until the day they finally got married. However, the marriage didn't end up being the happily ever after she'd hoped for, as several years went by without Dainichiro giving her even a minute of playtime with his trouser snake in the bedroom. Back then, she thought Dainichiro only took her as a wife because he felt that Reiya needed a mother, but even that was wrong because he ended up taking care of Reiya all by himself while she watched alone from a distance like a background character. One day, she asked Dainichiro to travel with her on a honeymoon trip, hoping to finally get some private time, but Dainichiro decided to bring Reiya along as well, and he ended up giving Reiya all the attention. She felt that the love he had for Reiya was the same as that of father and daughter, but one day, the butler told her to give up on asking for Dainichiro's love and showed her how he used to take those uncanny photos of Reiya right from her diaper years. Back in the present, Arya rants about how Dainichiro is still chasing remnants of the girl he once married by obsessing over Reiya and claims that she'll never be Reiya's mother. Suddenly, she starts smothering him with her bare mommy milkers while explaining that she can give him the warmth that a zombie girl can't, but she slips and falls on the floor. To make things worse, Chihiro tells her that he's only into zombie girls and not desperate cougars, so she starts crying while asking why everyone picks Reiya instead of her. Just then, Babu arrives, so she starts cuddling him, but Chihiro reveals that he's a zombie, so she throws him away out of fear. She then orders a maid to throw Chihiro and Babu away from the mansion, but the maid says she can't because Dainichiro wants to see Chihiro and wheels him away. Soon, they arrive at an empty room, where Dainichiro displays all the images he's taken of Reiya while monologuing about her beauty, and he thanks Chihiro for making him love his daughter more, but declares that he'll never forgive him. The maid pushes Chihiro through the hallway, and he asks Dainichiro where they're going, but the old fraud refuses to speak, so Chihiro fears that they're about to punish him by making 50 black dude crack him forcefully. In an attempt to escape, he begs the maid to take him to the bathroom, but she straight up tells him to go potty on the chair he's sitting on, which makes him realize that he's cooked. Suddenly, they arrive at a room, and Chihiro starts panicking again, but Dainichiro tells him to be relieved because they're not there to punish him. As they enter the room, Chihiro is shocked that it's actually a dojo, but Dainichiro tells him to pick any weapon from the collection, and he doesn't mind if he chooses to go barehanded. As the maid frees Chihiro of his bonds, Dainichiro picks up a fencing sword and claims that it's time for them to find out who gets to be with Reiya. Meanwhile, a taxi driver drops Reiya outside the manor, and she immediately rushes inside, where two maids greet her. She orders the maids to call her father, but they tell him that Dainichiro is busy and advise her to relax for the time being. Suddenly, the spies appear and cast some nets over her. Minutes later, one of the maids informs Arya that Reiya has been taken into custody and asks if she wants to see her, but Arya says there's no reason to see her. At the same time, the two maids dump Reiya in a dark underground room, and she's surprised that they're treating her that way, so the maids apologize while informing her that it's Dainichiro's orders. Reiya orders them to take off the restraints in her arms, but the maids troll her and decide to toy with her in ways they couldn't before. Seeing the mischievous smiles on their faces, Reiya panics, thinking they're about to use Brazzer's techniques on her, but they simply dress her in a maid outfit and gawk at how pretty she looks. While shivering in embarrassment, Reiya calls them cowards for forcing her into a maid outfit, but this gets them even more excited. as they spin a wheel to determine what cultured outfit to make Raya wear next. In the dojo, Chihiro is now fully dressed in fencing gear, and Danichiro says that all he needs to win is to land a single hit on him. But Chihiro still says it's unfair because he knows less about fencing than you guys know about showering. Hearing this, Danichiro permits him to use any sword style or martial arts moves that he knows very well, but Chihiro still complains that he doesn't know any form of combat. This makes Danichiro question why Raya would elope with such a weak, unskilled loser, so Chihiro takes off his mask and starts rage-baiting him with goofy dances. Back in the dungeon, the creepy maids force Raya into a bunny girl outfit and start glazing her beauty, and Raya orders them to unite her, but they say they can't defy Danichiro's orders. As they search for the next outfit to force her into, Raya suddenly goes Super Saiyan and shatters the restraints with her bare hands. Meanwhile, Chihiro tells the old fool that his plan to ignore Raya's feelings and hand her to whoever wins their petty duel is self-centered, and he also calls him a weirdo for taking illegal photos of Raya on her birthdays. As Danichiro wonders how he found out, Chihiro runs salt on the wound by saying it makes sense for Raya to run away since her dad is a reincarnation of Diddy. He then tells him to put all three nonsense about who is going to protect Raya aside and claims that it's no good to make decisions for her without letting her have a say in it, especially since he wants to protect her. As Raya runs towards the room, Chihiro tells Danichiro that he found out from Arya that Raya is in a lot of pain because he keeps trying to hide her in the shadow of his dead wife, but Danichiro gets enraged and stabs him at the exact time that Raya opens the door. Raya is stunned to see that her man has been turned into a donut, but Chihiro pulls a Tanjiro-style Uno reverse by headbutting Danichiro, causing him to scream in pain. When Chihiro sees Raya, he's shocked that she's there, but even more stunned that she's in a bunny girl outfit, which makes him start geeking out. However, Danichiro ruins the moment by angrily asking how he shrugged off the stab wound, so he explains that he just got excited and the adrenaline made him look past it. Suddenly, he remembers the time that Raya licked his wound and realizes that he's been infected by Raya's poison, which paralyzes his pain receptors. With a cheeky smile, Chihiro declared that he's a half-zombie, so Danichiro tries to lobotomize him, but Raya knocks off his blade and tells him that she'll be his opponent if he insists on fighting. Out of desperation, Danichiro asked Raya to move to America with him so that the best doctors can cure her of her condition, but Raya says she doesn't mind if she finds a cure because she wants to stay with Chihiro. Hearing this, Danichiro asks her why she wants something so simple despite being a special girl, so Chihiro walks over to him and angrily tells him that Raya just wants to be a normal girl. After remembering all that he's put her through, Danichiro breaks down in tears as he realizes that she died just to escape him, so Chihiro asks him to support them. Danichiro asks Raya if it's what she wants, and after she confirms that it is, he officially entrusts Raya to Chihiro, but warns him not to steal her V-card before walking away. However, Chihiro finally succumbs to his injuries and falls to the ground. Some hours later, Chihiro wakes up, and the maids inform him that they patched up his injuries. He then notices that Raya is wearing a maid outfit, so he starts geeking out over her new look, but Renko crashes the party by pouncing on him. Renko then introduces herself to Raya as Chihiro's human fiancé and strangles him while asking for the full story, but Raya realizes that Renko likes Chihiro. Some days later, Chihiro is in his private tent, feeling the weight of the responsibility that Danichiro just handed him, but suddenly, his pen spills some ink. During dinner, Dawn asks Mero why Raya's meal looks different from the others, so she explains that she made Raya's meal according to her tastes, which is basically a buffet of hydrangea leaves. Chihiro reminds his dad that Raya is a vegetarian, but he still questions if hydrangeas are vegetables, so Raya suggests that she start eating alone again to avoid all the commotion. Dawn says she shouldn't, since he was just curious, but Jogo suddenly starts charging towards Raya, only to get knocked down by Chihiro, who then explains to her that their grandpa acts like a crack addict sometimes. Hours later, Chihiro relaxes in his tent, and he realizes that everyone other than Gramps is getting suspicious of Raya, but they just don't ask questions out of kindness. Meanwhile, Raya is chilling on her bed when Babu suddenly jumps in, and she then hears the voice of Chihiro, who calls her to come outside. They head to a nearby river, where Chihiro tells her that he wants to take her to many places, but apologizes, since he can't do more than that. However, Raya says it's fine because she's having fun, and she couldn't even do something like that when she was back at her house. While walking through the street, she finds a banner informing her about an upcoming fireworks display, so she tells Chihiro about how she's always admired the past fireworks events through her window, and he decides that they'd go since it's a night event. Hearing this, she gets excited and promises to prepare herself so that her body doesn't rot away, and the two lovebirds start bickering. As they walk back home, Chihiro remembers that there are two methods of preserving Reiya's body, which include embalming and the use of preservatives. Even though he's investigated a lot, Chihiro has yet to find a fully effective method that would prevent her from rotting once and for all. While climbing the stairs to her room, Reiya calls Chihiro to join her, but he decides to go ask Jogo for directions on how to preserve her body, only to see that the Olden's brain is already in aeroplane mode. Suddenly, Mero arrives and asks Chihiro why he doesn't let Reiya go to school, so he explains that it's impossible because of the health problem she has. However, she claims that she can't see any health problems with Reiya, so he explains that there are a lot of things troubling her on the inside. Mero then reveals that Reiya once told her she was jealous of her for going to school and suggests having her leave early every other day so she could attend school, but Chihiro says it won't work. Deep down, Chihiro knows that the way Reiya is currently living isn't the life of a normal girl, and he wonders if her life is too much for him to handle. Unfortunately, a rainstorm ruins their plans to go see the fireworks display, so Reiya asks Chihiro to take her next year if she manages to stay alive. The next day, Chihiro is walking to school with his friends, but Ranko suddenly approaches him and starts pestering him with questions. Chihiro refuses to answer, so she starts strangling him again, and all the boys gather around them to watch since they can't afford OnlyFans subscriptions. Shortly afterwards, Chihiro meets Ranko privately and informs her that Reiya was looking forward to the fireworks display that got cancelled. However, Ranko says she was looking forward to going with him as well, and suggests putting on a fireworks display of their own. Back at home, Reiya is cleaning the yard while Mero praises her, but she loses all her aura points when the broom breaks, so she apologizes to Mero. Just then, Chihiro returns from school and asks her why she's outside in the middle of the day, so she explains that it's cloudy that day. He then suggests putting on their own fireworks display by launching some rockets, and both girls agree, so he tells Reiya that Ranko is willing to lend a yukata to her for the event. Reiya feels bummed out that Ranko is coming, but Chihiro doesn't notice this as he tells her that she's bringing the fireworks as well, and he also plans to wear a yukata. That evening, Ranko arrives in her yukata and tells Dawn about their plans to launch some fireworks. Suddenly, Chihiro and Mero arrive in their yukatas, and she's surprised that the Virgin can wear a yukata, so he explains that Mero helped him. Shortly after, Ranko helps Reiya put on her yukata, and Reiya asks about her relationship with Chihiro, so she explains that she treasures him because they're besties who go way back. She then tells Reiya that he's a good guy because the reason he accepted her fireworks idea is that it would make Reiya happy, and after she's done with the outfit, she claims that Reiya doesn't look like a zombie at all. However, Reiya informs her that she doesn't have much time left since her body is slowly decaying, but Ranko says she'll be fine and asks her to stay there forever. When she asks Ranko how she feels about Chihiro, she says she likes him without hesitation and directs the question back at her, but the zombie girl can't make up her mind, so she claims that she'll take her for herself. As Reiya starts to agree, Ranko tells her to stop considering her feelings because they're love rivals and smacks her peaches before advising her to stop holding back since she doesn't have much time left. Afterwards, they both declare that they won't give up and do a fist bump. Later that evening, everyone has fun together, lighting up some fireworks, and Reiya tells Chihiro that she prefers this smaller event to the larger one they had planned on attending. The next morning, Reiya returns to her manor and packs up her things for school, but Arya suddenly arrives and promises her that she won't expel her before letting her leave. Afterwards, Reiya meets with Chihiro outside, and they walk to a room where Chihiro confesses that he wants her to stay as she is for as long as possible. As he talks to her, she suddenly loses control of herself and drinks his blood correctly from his lips, making him realize that he can share his happiness with her. Did you like today's story? If you want to see such cultured anime recaps, comment melons. As always, like, subscribe, and watch this video on screen.